Chapter 1, The Spark of Rebellion. The cold void of space stretched infinitely around Captain Rhea Vasquez, her ship Starlight floating in the eerie silence of the Varlon system. For now, it was just a speck amidst the cold vastness, a single human vessel daring to defy the might of the Zarin Empire. Rhea sat in the command chair of the Starlight, hands resting lightly on the armrests, but her mind was far from relaxed. The light from the distant star Varlon 4 flickered in the viewport, casting harsh shadows on the bridge as the crew went about their tasks. The hum of the ship's engines was a constant companion, steady, dependable, but even that couldn't drown out the weight of what she was about to do. "Captain, we're approaching the coordinates." "It's just as the intel suggested," Commander Oren said, her voice breaking through the silence. Rhea glanced at the screen, her eyes narrowing. A small moon, Sienna, floated beneath them, seemingly quiet, hiding something far more dangerous than its tranquil surface suggested. The Zarin Empire had stationed one of their most secure installations here. Rhea knew exactly what they were holding, a human child. A child who was important enough to the Zarin that they had gone to great lengths to hide her. Rhea stood and moved to the holographic display at the center of the bridge. The child was no ordinary human. She had been taken from one of the outer colonies, kidnapped under the cover of night. They had called her Project Chimran, but Rhea and her crew knew her for what she truly was, the spark that could ignite the fire of rebellion across the galaxy. A child whose very existence could change the fate of humanity forever. "Captain," Oren's voice interrupted her thoughts again. "The station is heavily guarded. There's no way we'll get in unnoticed." Rhea's eyes stayed fixed on the screen. She wasn't worried about getting in unnoticed, she was more concerned with getting out. The Zarin were methodical, ruthless. If they knew they were being hunted, they'd burn everything to the ground just to keep the child under wraps. Time was their enemy. "We won't be sneaky. We'll hit them hard and fast," Rhea replied, her tone sharp and confident. She turned to her crew, the small group of soldiers and engineers who had pledged their loyalty to her cause. "Prepare for a direct assault. We can't afford to play by their rules. Our only chance is to strike when they least expect it." The tension in the room tightened as the crew exchanged knowing looks. The Starlight wasn't a warship, it was fast, maneuverable, and lethal in a fight, but it wasn't built to sustain a prolonged engagement. They had one shot, and it had to count. "We'll hit their communications first," Rhea continued, pacing the length of the bridge. "We disable their ability to call for backup, and then we move in. No hesitation." Lieutenant Riley, a sharp and quiet engineer, stepped forward. "We can do it. I'll take care of the EMP systems. We'll shut down their comms long enough to give us a window." Rhea nodded. She'd been in too many battles to count, but something about this mission felt different. There was a weight to it, an urgency. If they failed, it wouldn't just be their lives on the line, it would be the future of humanity. The thought gnawed at her, but she refused to let fear dictate her actions. The plan was simple, but it carried high stakes. They had to breach the outer defense perimeter, which was no small task. The Zarin station was a fortress, and any mistake would be their last. But Rhea trusted her crew, and she trusted the technology that had been developed specifically for situations like this. The Starlight wasn't just a ship, it was a weapon, and Rhea was its blade. "Captain, we're within range of the station's outer perimeter," Oren reported, her voice cool and controlled. "Cloaking devices are online. We can move in undetected." Rhea's hand clenched into a fist, but she didn't let the tension show. "Good. Prepare to drop out of FTL." The ship's engines hummed louder, and the vast darkness outside began to distort, giving way to the angular silhouette of the Zarin station. It was a massive structure, a series of interconnected modules suspended in space like some kind of mechanical spider. Rhea's breath caught for a split second. This was it. "Prepare for Phase 1, she ordered. The Starlight slowed as they approached the station's perimeter. The cloaking device kept them hidden from the station's sensors, but the danger was far from over. The Zarin were cunning, and they would have backup plans in place, anything to ensure their secret weapon remained protected. EMP pulse in 5 seconds, Riley said, her voice calm but laced with anticipation. She'd already programmed the device into the system. The countdown began on the display, ticking down in real time. 4, 3, 2, the lights on the bridge dimmed slightly as the EMP charge activated. Now! The pulse shot out in a burst of energy, invisible but devastating. The data streams on Rhea's console flickered, and the steady hum of the ship's systems faltered for a fraction of a second. The starlight shuddered as the wave of interference disrupted the station's communication systems. Rhea's eyes scanned the station's readout. The EMP had worked. The station's external comms were down, and they now had a narrow window of time to move in. Move quickly. We don't have long before they reroute. Rhea's voice was a steel blade cutting through the tension. Oren's hands flew over the controls. Shutting down external shields. They'll never see us coming. The seconds felt like hours as the ship glided toward the docking bay. Every crew member was in position, ready for the next phase. They'd fought together before, but this felt different. There was no room for error. Docking bay in sight, Oren called. We're clear to land. Rhea exhaled a breath she didn't realize she was holding. They'd made it. The docking bay loomed ahead, a massive airlock stretching open to receive them. The starlight slid in effortlessly, the landing gears deploying with a soft hiss. Rhea rose from her seat. Her boots clicked softly against the floor as she turned to the team. Move out. We don't know how much time we have before they figure out what's happening. We hit fast. We hit hard. And we don't stop until we have the child. The crew gave their affirmations, the same unspoken trust between them running as deep as the gravity well of a collapsing star. There was no turning back. The docking bay doors slowly slid open, and Rhea led her team into the dark interior of the station. The air inside smelled sterile, clinical, nothing like the heavy, humid atmosphere of a human colony. It was a place of order, of control. But Rhea had a different kind of order in mind. They weren't here to play by the Zaren's rules. They were here to make their own. As the team moved deeper into the station's shadowed corridors, Rhea couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She had expected resistance, but what she hadn't expected was the eerie quiet. No guards. No movement. Nothing. Where are they? Oren muttered, her voice low with suspicion. Rhea didn't answer. She couldn't. She was too busy focusing on the task ahead. There was no room for distraction. They were getting closer. And with each step, the tension in the air grew thicker. Something was coming. The question was, what would it be? Chapter 2, Into the Heart of the Beast. The silence inside the Zaren station was unnerving. The steady hum of Starlight's engines had faded the moment Rhea and her crew stepped onto the cold, metallic floor. The air smelled faintly of sterilized metal, a stark contrast to the harsh, humid conditions of the colonies they had just left. The station, as large and imposing as it was, felt like an unyielding tomb, as if its very walls were designed to suppress any sign of life or rebellion. Rhea's boots clicked softly against the floor as she led the way down the dark corridor. Every corner, every shadow, seemed to stretch longer than it should. There was no sign of resistance, no guards, no patrols. Only the sterile, mechanical atmosphere of the station. It made her uneasy. The Zaren were nothing if not methodical, and this eerie calm didn't sit well with her instincts. Stay sharp, she murmured to her team, her voice a low whisper. The sound of it seemed out of place in the oppressive stillness. Lieutenant Riley, who was flanking her on the left, nodded. Her fingers hovered above her weapon, ready to react at a moment's notice. The rest of the team spread out in a loose formation, their weapons raised, scanning the dimly lit hallway with caution. Where are they? Oren muttered, her voice tight with suspicion. It's too quiet. This doesn't feel right. Rhea didn't respond immediately. She had her own doubts. But one thing was clear, whatever they were walking into, it was waiting for them. The Zaren didn't hide their guards unless they had something bigger planned. Rhea's stomach churned with the growing sense that the worst was yet to come. At the end of the corridor, a large bulkhead door loomed. The control panel beside it flickered intermittently, likely powered down by the earlier EMP pulse. They had only minutes before the backup systems kicked in. Rhea turned to her team. "Riley, get it open. Oren, keep an eye on R6. "On it," Riley responded, her voice steady despite the tension hanging in the air. She moved swiftly to the panel and set to work, her fingers dancing over the interface with practiced precision. As the seconds stretched on, Rhea's gaze never wavered from the hallway behind them. The quiet was suffocating, and it felt like every beat of her heart echoed through the metal walls. She tried to push the feeling away. This was a mission like any other. Get in, get the child, and get out. Simple. But it was never that simple. The door slid open with a mechanical hiss, breaking the silence like a crack of thunder. Beyond it, the room was dark, but there was something off. Rhea could feel it in the pit of her stomach. "We're in," Riley said, her voice barely above a whisper as she glanced at the now open door. Rhea motioned for the team to move forward. The shadows inside the room were thick, but Rhea trusted the tactical lighting system on her visor to cut through the gloom. Her steps were slow, deliberate, every sense on high alert. As they entered, the dim light revealed a series of large, imposing cells along the walls. It was a holding area, and in the center, under a single beam of light, stood a small human figure. The child. Her heart skipped a beat at the sight. The girl was huddled on the floor, her knees drawn to her chest, her small body curled in on itself as if trying to shield herself from the world. But even in her fear, there was something about her, a quiet, unbroken resolve that made Rhea's throat tighten. The child's eyes flicked toward them as they entered, wide and wary. For a moment, they stared at each other in silence. Then, the child spoke, her voice small but sharp. "You're here to take me?" Rhea felt a pang in her chest. How much had this child endured? How much had she seen? And yet, even now, there was a fire in her gaze, a will to survive. "We are," Rhea replied gently, trying to mask the sudden rush of emotion that threatened to overtake her. "You're coming with us." The child hesitated, then nodded slightly, as if trying to reconcile the words with the reality she had been forced to live. She slowly stood up, her movements stiff and cautious. As Rhea stepped closer, she could see the exhaustion etched on the girl's face, the faint bruises around her wrists where the Zarin had bound her. But there was also something else, something stronger beneath the surface. The child wasn't just a captive, she was a survivor. Before Rhea could take another step, the sound of footsteps echoed from the far side of the room. "Get down!" Oren shouted. Rhea dove to the ground instinctively, taking cover behind the nearest cell as the first shots rang out. The Zarin had found them. The room exploded into chaos. Red blaster fire cut through the air, lighting up the dark space in sharp, jagged bursts. Rhea's team scrambled to return fire, but it was clear that the station's guards had been waiting for them. The Zarin forces were everywhere now, emerging from hidden alcoves and side corridors, their weapons drawn. "Take cover!" Rhea shouted, pushing the child to the floor behind a nearby pillar. She could hear the whine of plasma bolts as they zipped past, too close for comfort. Her heart raced, her instincts taking over as she barked orders. "Oren, cover left flank. Riley, get that comms terminal offline. We need backup, and we need it now." The fight intensified as the Zarin forces closed in. Their sleek black armor gleamed in the dim light, their weapons precise and deadly. But Rhea's squad had the element of surprise, at least for a few moments. Oren was first to react. She laid down a barrage of suppressing fire, forcing the Zarin to duck behind their own cover. Riley scrambled to the console, fingers flying over the controls in an attempt to disable the station's alarm systems before the full force of the Zarin defenses could be mobilized. "We've got incoming reinforcements," Riley called out, her voice laced with urgency. "We need to move, or this entire place will come down on us." "Not yet." Rhea snapped, eyes scanning the room for the next move. We get the child to safety first. Then we fight our way out. With a swift gesture, Rhea signaled to the others. They had one chance. If they didn't move quickly, the Zaren would bring the full weight of their military might to bear. "Cover me," she shouted, charging forward as the team laid down fire. She reached the child's side and pulled her up, motioning for her to stay close. The girl looked at her with wide eyes, the weight of what was happening slowly sinking in. She was about to be torn from everything she knew. But there was no time for explanations. They had to leave, now. "Stay with me," Rhea said, her voice firm but kind as she ushered the child through the chaos. The firefight raged on behind them as they moved toward the exit. Each step felt like an eternity as Rhea's mind raced ahead. The child was safe, for now, but the mission was far from over. And with every Zaren soldier they passed, the danger grew. As they reached the door to the next hallway, Rhea could hear the sound of the Zaren's warbits powering up. The worst was yet to come. "Get ready!" Rhea barked, as the door slid open. They were not done yet. But they would be ready. The galaxy was about to see just how far humanity would go to protect its own. Chapter 3, The Final Stand. The chaos of battle echoed throughout the halls of the Zaren station. Rhea's heart pounded as she sprinted down the narrow corridors, the child clutched tightly in her arms. Behind them, her crew fought tooth and nail to hold off the Zaren forces. Blaster fire crackled around them, lighting up the dark passages like streaks of lightning. It felt as though the entire station had descended into madness. The Zaren were relentless, swarming in waves from all directions, their voices cold and commanding as they pushed forward. "Captain, we're not far from the extraction point." Oren's voice crackled over the comm, strained but determined. "But the Zaren are closing in fast." Rhea didn't need to hear the urgency in her voice to know it was true. The sound of warbits thundering through the station's metal skeleton echoed, growing closer with every passing second. She could feel the weight of time pressing on her chest, suffocating her as the minutes slipped away. "Riley, do you have that backup signal ready?" Rhea called out, her words a desperate hope. "Almost." Riley's voice came through, sharp and clipped. "Just need a few more seconds. I've rerouted the emergency comms, but the signal's weak. If they find us now..." "We'll make it," Rhea interrupted, gritting her teeth. The child, silent but wide-eyed, clung to her side as they moved swiftly through the station. "We don't stop moving. The moment we get out of this hellhole, we'll be on our way to the rendezvous point." But even as she spoke, she knew the odds were slim. The extraction point was a tight corridor, and the Zaren had already begun reinforcing the area. They were being funneled into a trap. A sharp crackling sound came from behind them, and Rhea whirled around to see a squad of Zaren soldiers emerging from the shadows. Their black armor gleamed under the flickering lights, and their weapons were raised. "Shit," Oren muttered, already preparing for the fight. "We're boxed in." The tension in the air felt like it could snap at any moment. Rhea took a deep breath, shifting her weight. "Hold them off for as long as you can. Riley, get that signal to the fleet. We need our backup now." Riley didn't hesitate. "Done," she called back, her voice low but full of urgency. "It's going out, but I'm not sure how much time we have before they jam it." Rhea turned her attention back to the advancing Zaren soldiers. There was no time to waste. Her team had been trained for situations like this, but they were vastly outnumbered. The fight ahead would be brutal. "Get ready," Rhea said, her voice steady. "We take them down fast and move out." The first shots rang out as the Zaren soldiers opened fire. Plasma bolts shot through the air, the crackling energy lighting up the space in chaotic bursts. Rhea was already moving, her hand reaching for the blaster holstered at her side. She dove into cover behind a nearby pillar, returning fire with deadly precision. Oren and the others quickly followed suit, laying down suppressive fire to keep the Zaren back. The child crouched low behind Rhea, eyes wide with fear but unwavering. "Stay down." Rhea snapped, her voice harsh but protective. The battle raged around them. Blaster fire. The sharp sound of metal on metal as the Zarin warbits advanced. Shouts and grunts from her crew as they fought tooth and nail to stay alive. 2 more squads incoming from the rear. Oren shouted, her eyes scanning the area. We need a way out. Riley's voice cut through the chaos. There is no way out except through them, Rhea said grimly. She darted from cover, firing her blaster with perfect accuracy, knocking down one soldier after another. But for every one that fell, 2 more seemed to take its place. The Zarin were overwhelming them, slowly pushing them back. We're not going to make it, Riley's voice was laced with frustration and fear. They're everywhere. Rhea's mind raced, trying to find a way out of this situation. They were too far from the extraction point. They were running out of ammo. Backup was still minutes away. And then it hit her. The emergency airlock. Rhea snapped her head around to Riley, who had just taken down another soldier. Riley. The airlock. Can you override the door controls? Riley nodded, eyes sharp with realization. It'll take a few moments, but I can do it. The problem is, we'll be exposed while I work. Rhea gritted her teeth, looking around at the oncoming fire. The chances of them getting out of this were slim, but they had no choice. Do it. Rhea barked. We don't have a choice. The command was clear, and Riley moved quickly, her hands flying over the console in front of her. The Zarin were closing in, and Rhea's squad fought tooth and nail to keep them at bay. Plasma bolts whizzed by her, and the heat of the blasts singed the air. The child looked at Rhea, her gaze filled with an eerie calm. You're not going to leave me, right? Rhea met her eyes, her heart clenched. I promise. Seconds passed like hours, and the pressure of the fight seemed to crush Rhea's chest. Every time she fired, another Zarin soldier appeared. Her crew was growing tired, and their ammunition was running low. Finally, Riley's voice rang out over the chaos. It's done. The airlock's opening. Now. Rhea shouted. They moved fast, sprinting toward the airlock. Rhea held the child close as they ran, her heart pounding in her chest. The door slid open with a low hiss, revealing the vacuum of space beyond. The Starlight was docked just outside, hovering in wait. But as they neared the airlock, Rhea heard the unmistakable whine of a warbit's weapons powering up. They weren't alone. Go, go, go! Rhea yelled, pushing the child toward the open airlock. Oren and Riley were already moving to cover their escape, laying down suppressive fire. Rhea turned back to the door, her blaster raised. She fired at the advancing warbot, her shots hitting the weak points in its armor. Sparks flew, but it kept coming. Rhea, let's move! Oren shouted. Rhea hesitated for a split second, then ran toward the airlock. As the warbot reached the threshold, Rhea's team managed one final push, forcing it back with a barrage of fire. With a deafening roar, the airlock sealed behind them, and Rhea felt the Starlight's engines power up, pulling them into the safety of space. We made it, Oren said, her voice ragged, but relief flooding her tone. But Rhea didn't share in the relief. As the ship pulled away from the station, she watched the Zarin station grow smaller and smaller in the viewport. Their victory had come at a heavy cost. There were still so many questions left unanswered. The child. What did she mean for the galaxy? For humanity's future? And what kind of war was now inevitable? Rhea took a deep breath and turned to face her crew. We did it, she said quietly, looking at the child. But this is only the beginning. They were safe for now, but the battle for humanity's future had just begun. And Rhea would lead them through it, no matter the cost.